Hello Year 12s and welcome to the first in a series of 3 videos on how individuals or groups can influence law reform. That is, how individuals or groups can influence changes in the law. The word reform means to change. In this video, we'll be looking at how individuals and groups can influence law reform, that is, how individuals and groups can influence changes in the law through the use of petitions. There are 4 things that you need to do while you're watching this video. First, take the very best Cornell notes that you can. Second, use the pause and rewind functions. Use the pause function if you need to stop this video to take notes. Use the rewind function if you need to go over any information contained in this video. The third thing that you need to do is have your summary books open in front of you. As we go through this video, I will give you some guidance as to what you should include in your summary books. And the fourth thing that you need to do is have your vocabulary sheets open in front of you so that you can write into your vocabulary sheets the definitions of key terms and of any other words the meaning of which you're unfamiliar with. Once you've finished watching this video, make sure that you read the pages from the textbook referred to on this slide. And if you find any additional information from that reading that you think is useful, then supplement your Cornell notes with that additional information. Well, let's get started then. On this slide, I've set out your learning intention for this video. Make sure that you write this learning intention down in your Cornell notes. As a result of watching and taking notes on this video, you should be able to discuss the means by which individuals or groups can influence law reform through the use of petitions using examples. There are 3 ways in which individuals and groups can influence law reform, that is, changes in the law. These are through the use of petitions, demonstrations, and the courts. Each of the 3 videos in this series will look at one of these ways in which individuals and groups can influence law reform. As you can see from our learning intention, in this video we are looking at how individuals and groups can influence law reform through the use of petitions. Let's start off by defining what a petition is. A petition is a formal written request to Parliament for a change in law. Look down the left-hand side of your vocabulary sheets, find the term petition and write this definition in there. Because the word petition is a technical legal term, it's a good idea to define this term whenever you refer to a petition in an answer that you're writing to a SAC or exam question. A petition can be signed by 1 or more people, but it's likely to be more persuasive if it's signed by a large number of people from across the community. There are 2 types of petitions. The first type of petition is the more traditional print petition, in which people sign a paper petition with original signatures. Some of you may have been approached by people at shopping centres or by people who come knocking on your door to ask you to sign a print petition about a change in the law that they would like Parliament to make. The second type of petition, which is being increasingly used, is the digital petition, also known as an online petition or e-petition. This is a petition that people can sign online using their email address or a digital signature. There are certain requirements that a petition must comply with. First, a petition must be addressed to just one House of Parliament, that is, the House of Representatives or the Senate in the Commonwealth Parliament, or the Legislative Assembly or the Legislative Council in the Victorian Parliament. It must not be addressed just to the Commonwealth Parliament or the Victorian Parliament. Second, a petition must state the reasons that the petitioners, that is the people who are signing the petition, want the law to be changed. And third, the petition must be tabled, that is, presented to or introduced into Parliament by a member of the House to which the petition is addressed. So, for example, a petition that is addressed to the Senate must be tabled in the Senate by a senator. In the next two slides, I've given you two examples of recent petitions. The first example relates to live animal exports. In recent years, there have been a number of petitions presented to the House of Representatives calling for the abolition of live animal exports. That is, calling for the abolition of the export of live cattle, sheep and goats from Australia to other countries. This is because the poor conditions on some transport ships, such as high temperatures, little food, little water, and poor ventilation, have resulted in large numbers of these animals dying. These petitions have been partially successful. Partly as a result of them, some members of Parliament introduced private members' bills to prohibit live animal exports from Australia. However, these bills didn't pass Parliament because they weren't supported by the government. Nonetheless, the Commonwealth Government did subsequently introduce a bill to establish an independent Inspector General of live animal exports. This bill passed into law as the Inspector General of Live Animal Exports Act 2019. This Act establishes an independent Inspector General of Live Animal Exports who is responsible for examining the effectiveness of the operation of Australia's livestock export regulatory system and for making recommendations for its improvement. This Act doesn't respond entirely to the concerns of the petitions because it doesn't prohibit live animal exports from Australia. However, it does put in place a regulatory regime which is designed to improve the conditions under which live animals are exported from Australia to other countries. The second example of a recent petition relates to climate change. There's been growing concern about the effect on our climate of greenhouse gases that are released into the atmosphere by industry, cars and farms. Specifically, these greenhouse gases are causing an increase in global temperatures, that is, an increase in temperatures across the world. In response to this concern, in 2019, Noah Bell, a 23-year-old Australian citizen, created a digital petition that requested the House of Representatives to pass legislation to reduce these greenhouse gas emissions by, for example, capping the amount of greenhouse gases that industries are permitted to release. This petition contained 404,538 signatures, and it was tabled in the House of Representatives by Zali Steggall, a crossbencher. However, this petition didn't have much effect, as despite being the second largest ever petition presented to the House of Representatives, it did not influence the then Liberal National Party coalition Commonwealth Government to change its climate change policies or to support a change in the law as requested by the petition. You'll recall that our learning intention requires you to be able to discuss the means by which individuals or groups can influence law reform through the use of petitions. On this slide and the next slide, I've included a table that sets out the strengths and weaknesses of petitions as a way for individuals and groups to influence reforms, that is, changes in the law. You can use this table as a basis for your discussion of the way in which individuals and groups can influence law reform through the use of petitions. Please include this table in your summary books and make sure that you supplement the information contained in this table with notes from your reading of the textbook and from the discussion which follows, which will help you to better explain the points made in this table. The first strength of petitions is that they are easy and inexpensive to organise. This is especially the case with a digital petition, which can be put online and signed by petitioners online using their email or an electronic signature. However, some people who support the change in law that the petition is requesting Parliament to make might be reluctant to sign a print petition or a digital petition because it includes their contact details and they wish to protect their privacy. The second strength of petitions is that if a petition has a very large number of signatures, then it is more likely to put pressure on Parliament to change the law as requested by the petition. This is because a petition with a large number of signatures is more likely to demonstrate that there is widespread support for changing the law. As we know, because the Australian parliamentary system is based on representative government, members of Parliament will be more inclined to vote for a change in the law where this is supported by voters, because otherwise they risk being voted out of Parliament at the next election. It is likely to be easier to gain a larger number of signatures for a petition using a digital petition rather than a print petition. Conversely, a petition with a small number of signatures is unlikely to be very effective in persuading Parliament to change the law. In addition, if there are opposing petitions, then Parliament is less likely to be persuaded to change the law. This is because if some people want the law to be changed, whereas other people don't want Parliament to change the law, then parliamentarians might not vote to change the law because they see that the change is controversial and is likely to cost them votes at the next election. This has been the case with petitions to the Victorian Parliament to change the law to permit Easter and Christmas celebrations in government schools, and petitions to the Commonwealth Parliament to change the law to permit same-sex marriage. In both cases, there were petitions for and against these changes in the law. While the Commonwealth Parliament did ultimately change the law to permit same-sex marriages, the Victorian Parliament has not changed the law to permit Easter and Christmas celebrations in state schools. And, irrespective of the number of signatures on a petition, the success of the petition in influencing a change in law is generally more dependent on the influence of the Member of Parliament who tables the petition, that is, the influence of that Member of Parliament within the government or Parliament. We saw this with both the petitions to change the law to abolish live animal exports and the petition to change the law to reduce greenhouse gases. In neither case were these petitions supported by a member of the government, and so they didn't have much success. And this was despite the fact that the climate change petition, with 404,538 signatures, was the second largest petition ever presented to the House of Representatives. The third strength of petitions is that just the process of gathering signatures can help raise the awareness of the public and the politicians to the need for a change in the law as requested by the petition. However, this effect may be quite limited because gathering signatures and submitting a petition to Parliament is not a very visible, that is not a very public process. And so many people in the community might not become aware of either the petition or the change in the law that the petition is requesting. This is quite different from demonstrations which occur in public and are more likely to be publicised by the media, thus raising the awareness of the public and politicians about the change in law that the demonstration is supporting. Finally, the fourth and last strength of petitions is that they're tabled in Parliament. As such, a petition might get the attention of a Member of Parliament who is willing to champion the change in law that the petition is requesting. Alternatively, or in addition, the tabling of the petition in Parliament might attract the attention of the media, which might then publicise the petition and the change in law that the petition is requesting. This publicity might put pressure on Parliament to change the law as requested by the petition, because members of Parliament might see the publicity as reflecting widespread voter support for the change. Having said this, the state and Commonwealth Parliaments receive a large number of petitions every year, and so they can't consider and deal with every change in the law that these petitions are requesting. Indeed, there's no guarantee that Parliament will discuss, let alone respond to, a petition that is made to it. And finally, there's no guarantee that the media will publicise a petition that is presented to Parliament. As I've said, the petitions that are more likely to be successful in influencing Parliament to change the law are those that are championed by an influential member of Parliament, which generally means a parliamentarian who holds a senior role within the government. Well, that brings us to the end of this video. As a result of watching and taking notes on this video, you should now be able to discuss the means by which individuals or groups can influence law reform through the use of petitions, using examples. In this video, I have given you the example of the live animal export and climate change petitions, and in class I will give you some additional examples. Don't forget to read the pages from the textbook referred to on the first slide. And if you find any additional information from that reading that you think is useful, then supplement your Cornell notes with that additional information. Thank you for your attention.